All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. I almost said good morning, but I know we've got people joining from across different time zones. So wherever you are, I hope you're having a good day. Welcome to Advancing Geographies of Justice by Removing Offensive Place Names on behalf of the California Geographic Alliance, the California Global Education Project, the California Subject Matter Projects, and the National Council for Geographic Education, who are all supporting this event today. And we'll be talking more about them. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment and just say hello. I'm Tom Herman, your host for today, and I'm involved in different ways with all those organizations I just shared. And my reason for being involved is the single purpose of supporting high quality geography education through collaboration with education leaders and educators at all levels. And this program that you're about to experience is one example of that collaboration. So thank you to the educators and the future educators that are joining us today, and a special hello to students anywhere who are joining from their classrooms or their multi-purpose rooms or their computer labs. So excited to have students joining us today. I've been putting a link in the chat with access to the slides that I'll be sharing today and some resources I've put together on this topic. So you have access to that. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my screen sharing. By the way, apologize. I'm flying solo as a webinar host today, so I'll try and be efficient, but bear with me when I'm not. You should be seeing my slides again. And I wanted to say that we're getting an early jump on Geography Awareness Week, which technically starts next week. But already today, I think you're going to find that we're embracing the spirit of this year's theme, which is Geographers Take Action. So please be aware of Geography Awareness Week happening between, let's say, now and the end of next week, and take the opportunity to dig into the subject area. For today's webinar, we have a lot of information to pack into an hour. So we're going to try and stay on time, and I apologize for talking quickly. We've got three things to kind of include in the agenda. The first is that we're going to approach an important topic with the intent to become aware and prepare ourselves to act in response to what we are learning. This is going to be a challenging topic. And I want to just to make sure people are prepared for that. I'll try not to repeat on my own the words I regard as slurs, but we must confront the issue if we're going to change it. So, like the other participants and panelists in the workshop, I encourage you to be prepared for difficult conversations and to approach that with openness and the intent of being part of a change process. We have a great opportunity today to hear from two scholars who are taking action. They're working to address this issue both in the United States and in other parts of the world. And so we're going to hear from them shortly. You see their pictures there. Dr. Derek Alderman from the University of Tennessee and Dr. Daniel Otto Perales from a university in Spain, Pablo de Olavide. And so we're going to hear from these two individuals, and they're going to actually share with you some tools that you can use. So we're going to make sure there's opportunities for you to learn more, to engage with your community, and to take action. So I will say now, and I'll hopefully repeat again, we want to make this an interactive webinar, even with the time limitations. So please use the Q&A function in Zoom to queue up questions. I've set it so that if somebody's already asked a question that's the one you wanted to ask, you can vote it up, or you can add a comment to kind of modify, add a friendly amendment to the question. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hopefully everything is working. Everybody's getting the content. I'm not seeing anything in the chat yet to respond to. So first of all, as your host, I wanted to make sure to just kind of account for myself and do a little bit of self-reflection and share with you my positionality on this subject. Um, after all, I'm the one who decided that we should organize this webinar, and so I had to think about why. I'm clearly of the dominant culture group in the United States. I'm a white man of European heritage. I've had economic benefits that come with being part of that culturally advantaged group, even if I disagree with the assignment of advantages to my group. But I also want to share with you some of my own life experiences, and hopefully this cues you to think about your own experience and exposure to this topic. Because while I am a white man, I did have an interesting experience in high school. I lived in a majority black city in Washington, D.C., and I graduated from Archbishop Carroll High School, which was a boys' school, which was over 90% black in my graduating class. So I did have an opportunity to experience being a minority, part of a minority group in the community where I lived. And Washington, D.C. is a special kind of place. I mentioned this with our panelists. It's the only place I know of where there's an intersection between Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. avenues. So there's some awareness to my experience that comes just from occupying that space. In 1991, 91, I moved to New Mexico State University to continue studying geography. I'd gotten a bachelor's degree at Villanova University, and I went to New Mexico State to continue my studies. And I actually got into public land management, particularly wilderness planning. And I did a study of a kind of a pilot study of a wilderness plan for the Sierra Ancha Wilderness, which is in the Tonto National Forest. And if you notice there, I just clipped some of the trails that I inventoried in documented conditions along every trail in this wilderness area. You can see the very first one as a questionable name. So I realized during that period that public lands were littered with racially charged and derogatory place names that were kind of persisting in plain sight because not many people were aware. But I kind of hoped that there was a change process. But to be honest, I didn't take responsibility for it. I didn't get involved in changing those names. Fast forward another 2 years, I continued my studies in geography at San Diego State University, and I ended up living in a neighborhood called City Heights, which is a multicultural community. I lived there because it's where I could afford housing as a graduate student, but it also became a great fascination to me. And so it's the neighborhood where I focused my academic research initially on everyday geographies of children. So that sensitized me to looking through other people's eyes at the landscapes that I shared with them. Just the way in New Mexico, I learned for the first time about indigenous and Latinx cultures and experiences. Here in San Diego, I learned about children's experiences and a large variety of diverse cultural backgrounds. Okay, so then I want to share a story, a particular San Diego story that I learned about over time as I was living here. And I think it's a great kickoff to what we're going to be talking about throughout this webinar. So what got my attention about this story was not the fantastic person that is the center point of the story, but what actually got my attention and made this story stick with me over time was the legacy of offensive place names that had been associated with this story. So Nathan Harrison is somebody that's been called the Forrest Gump of San Diego County. He was involved in the California Gold Rush brought by his enslaver as forced labor, gained his freedom, became a homesteader, became a tourism pioneer. He was born probably about 1833, lived till 1920, so a period when San Diego was just growing up as a place. He's been identified as the most photographed 19th century resident of San Diego, which is kind of an interesting factor, kind of statistic, but it tells you what a figure he was, what a public figure, because at his ranch, he welcomed visitors into the new recreational experience of outdoor hiking, nature exploration. And as you were going up to the beautiful Palomar Mountain area in San Diego County, he would greet you along the road, offer you water for your car and for the passengers of the car to help you along your way and tell you stories. And so, how did the community take notice of Nathan Harrison and how did they commemorate his role as a great San Diegan? Well, they named places after him. And here, what I'm showing on the screen is part of a 1938 USGS map, so United States Geological Survey official map. I've pulled this up from the Esri Living Atlas, and there's a link on the slide. And you can see that the road that his homestead was along and the canyon where his homestead was located got the word N-word canyon or N-word grade road. I can assure you, I've looked through this tool. This name was in place on the maps in 1903. So 17 years before Nathan Harrison's death, at least, they had labeled the landscape around him with this offensive place name. Now, if we fast forward and look at a more modern map, we can see what's happening in that same area. The road name is gone, and the name has been changed to Harrison Canyon to commemorate this individual who had a lot to do with this location. But that name change didn't take place till 1959. So, so that's a terrible story, right? But it's also got a positive outcome in that there was a change. There was a recognition that that was inappropriate to attach that name to a place because of a resident's racial identity. And in California, we've got a state park initiative that's looking at changing discriminatory names and updating. We can also look at the California Advisory Committee on Geographic Names. That logo is a link in the slides. And you can see that they're reviewing currently a number of proposed changes, many of them because of offensive place names, but also many of them trying to attach new names to places that haven't been named yet in recognition of a more diverse population that has ties to that landscape. Okay, so what I shared with you tells you I know a little bit, I know something about this issue, and I know something about the communities that have been harmed by the practice of using offensive place names to essentially other and even terrorize specific groups of people. If you feel that this word refers to you or people in your community or people that share your culture in a derogatory way and you see it repeatedly on signs as the way people refer to places, that that reminds you of the problematic attitudes that exist in the larger space with regard to people who share your identity. So I'm always looking to learn more on this topic, which is why I found myself reading this article that I'm showing you on the screen back in August. It's from a wonderful online publication called The Conversation. And I reached out to the authors, one of whom I knew as a geographer, one of whom I knew by name as a geographer, and the other who's here today, I didn't know. He's an economics professor from Spain, so that's not surprising that I didn't know him. But they were gracious enough to agree to an interview, and they're actually here with us today as part of the workshop. So just really quickly, Derek and Daniel, I think you'll be able to unmute yourself and say a quick hello. I think I saw them on the participant list. Okay.
Hey, Tom, this is Derek.
Yeah. Hey, Derek, go ahead.
Hey, just want to say hello and thank you for having me involved in this.
All right, Daniel, I think I gave you permission to talk.
Hello, everyone. Hello,
Yes, Daniel, we can hear you.
you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, hello. Thank you for.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for joining. Um, I apologize right now because I asked them to speak to you and confirm they're here live because what we did is we recorded an interview so that we could edit it down and make sure it fit within an hour. So I've chopped up our interview a bit, and I apologize to our panelists So you're going to be kind of viewing excerpts from this interview, and you can access a link with the full interview later. So there's a lot of good information that I chopped out, but that you can go back and look into on your own time. In the conversation, in the kind of segments I've set up, first we're going to be hearing from Derek Alderman. And so I put a link in here to his individual website. You can learn more about his scholarship, lots more than we're able to cover today. So I want to make sure you're able to see the work that he's doing around place names and around histories and legacies of racial justice in the United States. But I'm going to go ahead and jump into our interview and play the first excerpt where we're going to hear Derek talking about how he got into this field as a geographer and the topic of place names. I want to welcome both of you and thank you for taking time to share about your important work. In this conversation, I will first turn to Derek Alderman, who's a prominent figure in American geography as a result of his research and his service to multiple causes and organizations. He studies the American South as a cultural region and investigates intersecting topics of public memory and heritage landscapes, mobility and travel, social justice, and race relations in that region and in our country more broadly. Dr. Alderman is a professor of geography at the University of Tennessee, a former president of the American Association of Geographers, and someone who contributes substantially to the ongoing effort to advocate for high-quality geography education for all American students. I particularly appreciate Dr. Alderman's public scholarship and his willingness to share academic research with a non-academic audience. In 2022, Derek was appointed by Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland to serve on the Federal Advisory Committee on Reconciliation and Place Names, U.S. Department of the Interior. He is, in fact, the lead co-author of the committee's place name reconciliation principles. That's pretty impressive. Derek, I'd love to start by hearing about how you became interested in the subject of geography enough to pursue a PhD in the field, and specifically how your own life experiences shape the interests and types of questions that are at the core of your scholarship.
Well, thanks, Tom. Right at this point, I'll share my screen. Tom, thanks for that really nice introduction and for the chance to be part of this. I did not know that geography was a major field of study until I got into college for my undergraduate degree at Georgia Southern University. I was a history major. I took my first college level geography course to fulfill a general education requirement. I really just sort of accidentally got into geography, but I had a great college teacher or mentor in Dr. Daniel Good, and he quickly helped me fall in love with the field of geography. And I think that's important because many of our stories are not just about the field itself, but about the people that we interact with, that we connect with. I guess as a kid, I always had a gut feeling that place was important, sense of place was important to people. But it was Dr. Good who really, who's pictured here in this slide, that pushed me to explore these issues in a lot deeper, more creative ways. And the vision of geography that Daniel Good gave to me was a field engaged with communities. It was a field that was addressing social and environmental issues, and it was a field that was devoted to public-facing scholarship. And that vision has really become part of my academic DNA. Dan Good was of a different generation than I am, or some of us here on this Zoom. But and he didn't really use these words exactly, but he taught me what's now probably called a place-based ethics of care. And what he was getting at was that he saw an intimate relationship between people and place, and he recognized in many, I think, important ways that places have critical consequences for people. They have critical consequences for their well-being, that places are important to one's sense of belonging. And at the heart of this ethics of care, and I've tried to illustrate here on this slide, is that places are often made in ways that can ignore, control, or even wound or harm historically marginalized people. In other words, places can be a source of inequality and discrimination. But it's also possible and this is the exciting part to me, it's also possible for places to be made in ways that give voice and opportunity and respect to those same discriminated groups. In other words, places can be a source of empowerment and a source of social change. And I think another dimension of this place-based ethics of care that has really driven a lot of my work and my interest in geography is the fact that geographers, they don't just study places. Traditionally, maybe geographers thought that that's what they do, but really now geographers don't just study places. Geographers can and should help make places more equitable, more healthy, more sustainable. In other words, it's the role of geographer to play to play an important impact in terms of building a better future. And so geography is a field of action. I'm proud to say that. And as someone who's been involved in the field for quite a while, I see so many of my colleagues illustrating this every day. Geographers have a responsibility to turn their scholarship, their professional work, their teaching, just their community engagement into what we call actionable knowledge. And what I mean by actionable knowledge is that it's when we use geographic information and resources to inform community debates, educate the media, advance inclusive policy, such as place name policy, street naming decisions could be examples. And so if you think about it, I think where I would love to see, I think where my own education has moved and where I would like to see more education moving, and I think it is towards this place-based ethics of care. And it's been those very questions of place and ethics and care that's driven a lot of my work. It's pushed me to think about asking questions about who gets to create places, whose worldviews and experiences are written into or out of those places. And how do we name places in ways that in fact either care for people or care for other differences and diversity, or in fact ignore those differences and that diversity.
I want to welcome both of you and thank you for taking time to share. Okay, that was a little bit of a technical glitch. We got through the first segment, but I didn't realize it would just keep reloading the video. Let me switch out real quick and queue up the next. Okay. I will be navigating that transition in the future as well. So that was Dr. Alderman kind of getting us started in this. And I mentioned already that he's part of this invited, a rather appointed member of Federal Advisory Committee addressing reconciliation and place names. So I've put in here in this slide a link to that committee's kind of webpage where you can find out more about that. And now we're going to move into a second segment of the interview where he talks more about that.
And really, this is where it all started for me in terms of the study of place names and street names, and a lot of these issues of racial reconciliation and social justice is related to names. I first became interested in place name study while writing a doctoral dissertation at the University of Georgia on the renaming of streets after civil rights icon Martin Luther King Jr. And at that point, those streets, which are now well known now, but at that point, those streets were still relatively new on the American landscape. And I was interested in sort of the typical geography questions of how many streets there were, where they're located, and what the presence of those streets told us about positive changes in race relations, as well as changes in the way America was willing to publicly remember Black history. And I did discover that those streets were important indicators of a growing political influence of African Americans within cities and towns. But what I also found, and this was probably the transformative moment for me as a place name scholar and a geographer, is I found that naming streets for Dr. King was very highly controversial, and that Black communities faced significant obstacles in the naming process and in the struggle to remember King not just generally, but to also figure out where best to remember King within those cities and those communities. White controlled city councils and county commissions, especially in the South where I was working at the time, often block proposals by Black communities to attach King's name to large commercial thoroughfares. And many Black communities wanted King's name up on these big major roads that would cut across traditional racial and economic boundaries. But what they ran into, and more times than not, is that many white residents, business owners, they bitterly opposed having their address identified with King. They were opposed with having their streets named for Dr. King, and because they interpreted it as being associated with the Black part of town, and the stigma that they attached to that, which was regrettable and tragic. And what I learned from that was, in fact, a very bitter irony, was that, much of America was celebrating a civil rights leader who battled inequality and racial divides by actually racially segregating his name and memory in disadvantaged African American neighborhoods. And it was a real turning point for my thinking about place naming, in the sense that it got me thinking about that sometimes you can't just rely upon what you see on the landscape or what you rely and see on a map or on a database of street names. You have to go and look into the history of the struggle behind that name and how it came to pass, how it came to be. And all of this work led me to discover and begin to contribute to a field of study that we call critical place name studies. And that is really the study that I've been trying to contribute to now for the last 25, 26 years of my career. All right, so I promised I wouldn't do this, but I did it anyway. I talked a lot about King Streets, and I'm sorry. But my work has still stays really interested in King Streets, but it's shifted and has expanded in many ways. And one of the things that I've become much more interested in lately is what I call America's place renaming moment. And what I mean by that is that we're seeing growing public interest well beyond naming streets for King, well beyond naming streets for Malcolm X or other figures. We're starting to see growing public interest in identifying challenging place names of all sorts. Names that are offensive and oppressive to Black and indigenous communities, names that are offensive or oppressive to other people of color or women. And there's a growing push in America right now, and I try to give you a few headlines here on the screen. There's a growing push in America right now to do dignity and justice to the nation's diversity. And these are taking place in communities of all sizes and shapes, where there are questions being asked about why that name is attached to this street. Why is that name attached to this park, to this school? And it's led me really to devote a lot of my career to trying to do interventions in place name policy and education. And this is a little embarrassing because I've got a few slides on here that talk about me, and this really shouldn't be about me, but I want to give an example of how I think geographers can make a difference. In other words, they're putting themselves in positions where they're writing about and speaking about issues that can have a direct bearing on how communities see these issues and how they debate them. And so a lot of my work is about street names, but it also deals with the naming of schools, the naming of university buildings, the naming of businesses. And it really pays attention to the fact that a lot of this work in terms of reaching out to and being important to communities isn't just in the traditional classroom, although it can happen there, but it's also about getting in front of city, county leaders. It's also about doing webinars like this or doing teach-ins. And so one of your questions, Tom, was how did I end up on this federal advisory committee? And there's sort of two answers to this. One, I had a very generous colleague who decided to nominate me, and I was very grateful for that. It was a geographer within our organization, the American Association of Geographers. But honestly, he told me that part of the reason he nominated me was that he thought a geographer should be in a position to inform public policy. And so he had confidence in me, but he also had a confidence in our field and a confidence in our discipline. Why else did I get on this committee? I think probably my work on looking at place naming and civil rights, my work with other public groups. I think that I think some of the things that I was trying to say and do within my own field mattered. But I will tell you in all sincerity that as much as it's a great honor and I feel really flattered and privileged to be on this committee, I have gotten more out of this committee than I have brought. So have I contributed a lot? I think I have, but I've gotten a heck of a lot out of this committee. I work with a fantastic group of scholars and advocates from a lot of different communities across the country. They're pictured here. We're in front of Devil's Tower, Bear Lodge, and we've been able to work together. I've learned a great deal about the place name needs of tribal nations, and learned about the place name needs of a lot of other communities. And I just want to leave us with that idea that, yeah, it's about sometimes what we know, but it's also about being open to learning and being taught and being educated. And so I come back to this one final point that for me to be a good geographer and to be a better geographer, yeah, it's about me engaging in my field, but it's also about me engaging with people who are already doing geography, even if they don't call themselves geographers.
All right, excellent.
And really, this is where it all started for me.
Still working on the system here. Thank you to Yuri for starting us off with the Q&A. And so we've heard from a good geographer. I'm feeling that Derek Alderman is a good geographer because of how he's using his knowledge to take action. But it's not only geographers that can use geography to take action, right? So we're gonna shift now to our second panelist, who I apologize, I can't figure out how to get their video live right now, but they're at least on the recording. So Dr. Otto Peralius, who I mentioned earlier and said hello, is somebody that Derek Alderman said right away, well, we need to get him on the webinar because he's the one who's done this work with the Street Names Lab. And so in addition to being a professor in Spain in a Department of Economics, he's started this work around street names data science that is something that I'm extremely excited to share with you. So we're going to go ahead and move on in the interview. Continue to ask your questions. I think the panelists can access and answer the Q&A as well, but we'll try and stay up on that. As we continue this conversation, I want to bring Daniel Otto Peralius into this conversation. I'm sure he's going to bring additional perspective. He's also going to make this conversation span nearly halfway around the globe, as we've got California, Tennessee, and now Spain. Dr. Otto Peralius is an associate professor in the Department of Economics at the Universidad Pablo de Olavide in Sevilla, Spain. His research focuses on the fields of economic development, economic history, and economic geography, particularly on the role played by inequality and institutions in economic activity and welfare, paying special attention to the historical processes involved. So history, social science educators in the U.S. will relate to his work on many levels. And I first learned about Dr. Otto Peralius from this article, so I apologize to him that I can't give a more comprehensive introduction, but I assure you I'm paying attention to what you're doing now with the Street Names Lab, which is a project that brings a data science approach into the realm of street names and into name reconciliation. So that's a very different approach than many cultural geographers might use, but it's very effective and complementary. And I think this project is a powerful demonstration of how geography, data science, and computer applications can come together to create places that are the best possible reflections of ourselves. So, Daniel, without further ado, can you tell us more about the Street Names Lab, how it got started, and the kinds of projects you and the larger team have worked on so far, knowing that your entry into this topic is probably very different than Dr. Alden.
Yes, thank you Tom, for organizing the webinar, for inviting me to participate. And I'm gonna share a screen. Okay. Okay, the Street Name Lab is a research team of social scientists, mainly, but not only with an economic background, that apply quantitative and computational tools to street name data. We got first interested in street names as a source of information for social and cultural values of city and town, because typically information about the culture of cultural values come from national and regional surveys, but it's very available at the local level. We found in the street names a way to measure this hard to find data. This is because the street name reflects the commemorative priorities of local communities. So the street name arguably reflect their social and cultural values. And naturally, this assumes that the street naming decisions are taken at the local level, as is generally the case. We have corroborated several studies and the usefulness of street names to capture the cultural values of local communities. For instance, in this paper, we show that an indicator of religiosity calculated from street name data is strongly correlated with the religiosity of the population measured through surveys. Here, for instance, we show that the population in provinces with a higher percentage of religious streets tend to attend more to religious services than the population of provinces with a lower percentage of religious streets. We show for other cultural and social dimensions that street names are related actually to social and cultural value. For example, for national identity and gender equality, we show a similar correlation. For instance, considering attitudes toward gender roles, we show that people living in towns with a greater proportion of female streets tend to have more egalitarian gender views, measured through survey questionnaires. This evidence that we show for Spain has been recently replicated for the case of Italy by other researchers. Related to the gender issue, we have conducted a project where we quantify the gender gap in street names. We create an algorithm to automatically classify all streets, all Spanish streets by their gender, if any, during the last 20 years. Once we did this, we developed several tools to help citizens and people in general, on the one hand, know how large and persistent is the gap in the gender gap in the street name, and on the other, to help them monitor the progress toward equality in their towns. So now I'm going to move to the street name lab website, and here in application we have the Gender Cities project, and we, for example, have this interactive figure in which we type the name of a town, for example, the main city of Spain, Madrid, the capital, and we can see the evolution of the proportion of women streets. The proportion of women streets in relation to the total number of streets named after people. So we see that first, that the proportion is low, is only 17% in 2001, and has slightly increased until 18% in 2022. For example, we can check Barcelona, the second largest city in Spain, and we see that in Barcelona, the percentage is much lower. Is nowadays about 12%. So we can check the progress in gender equality in this dimension for every town in Spain. And this this resource we think is useful for social movement, and is an increasing attention being paid to more equality in the street scale. And we also, for example, have this map in which we show the percentage of female streets across provinces, and also we zoom in a province, we see the percentage across town, in an across city within the province, and also we zoom in, we see the distribution of female and male streets within a city. And we typically see in cities that the proportion, the presence of female streets is more frequent in the periphery, in part because it is easier for local authorities to name new streets than to rename existing ones. Well, we have also created streets name search apps for North America, for Spain, for Europe. And these apps enable users to find and download street name data, which may be useful for many purposes. One of them is the topic of this seminar, that is the search for discriminatory and offensive road names. Okay, so this is some of the work we have done in recent years, and I think it's enough to get some idea of what we do.
As we Okay, that is awesome. So we can see from what Daniel shared right there that he might be an economist, but he's doing some very interesting geographic inquiry, and he's using the data science tools not just to look at offensive place names, but other ways in which place names are used to kind of claim space and to reflect on different groups, whether that's males and females in society, religious or non-religious people, or people of different cultural groups. So the next segment that we're going to get to, and the last segment of the interview, is really about the how-to tools that you can use to do the same kind of inquiry in your area of interest, probably your home community, but it could be your state or elsewhere around the world, to look at how street names in particular are assigned, which types of names are in use, which types of names aren't in use, and how that reflects inclusion or exclusion or valuation or devaluation of different culture groups. So I'm going to go ahead to this last segment and keep the questions coming. I think you talked about this a little bit, but as I mentioned, we're going to direct folks to using the North American Street Names app, although certainly exploring other parts of the website as well. But can you say more about how it works from the design side, how you get the large volumes of street name data that are really the power of the app, and then also how you envision people using the app, just citizens or other scholars, anybody that you had in mind as this app was being designed?
Well, starting by the last question, and I think Derek for sure is the same, that the street names attract a lot of interest by the public, by journalists, by people in general. Street names don't go unnoticed, and there are a lot of news about the street name every day. There's a lot of controversy because it's a symbolic policy. Street names generate very charged debates, and people need this data, and we thought that there was no app or no way for a non-expert researcher or for a non-expert user to get the street name data, and we thought about this and about making an app easily accessible to people without computational and technical background. So, well, going to the North American street name app, we get the data from OpenStreetMap, which is a quite comprehensible source of toponyms and includes all roads named in the US and in most of countries around the world. Okay. Once we get the data, we process it, and to minimize the cases of duplicating the streets, and we also remove a street without name, or a street that just contain numbers or symbols that are not interesting to us. This gives us, for the US, just for the US, this gives us 7 million streets. So our database is 7 million streets. So this is a large database. Then we extract the coordinates of each street, so the user can later on get this coordinate. And we also overlap the geographic layer of the street with other geographic layer of administrative boundaries, cities, for cities, counties, and states. So the North American app includes Canada, Mexico, and the United States. We focus on the United States. We can perform queries for particular states, 1 or 2 or 3 particular states, or for the whole United States. If we do the last thing, it takes longer because this is a query in a data set of 7 million states, so it takes a bit longer. And for a particular state, is much faster. So, for example, for California, we can enter a query, we can enter one or more terms or names separated by a semicolon. We can write a full name or word or part of a word followed by an asterisk, or with an asterisk before. For example, if we do this query for California, for example, we write type road. This is a query for all streets in California with that contains a word starting with road. And we see that there are a lot of streets containing a word that starts with road. But we can, so this is, you can see the functionality of the asterisk. We just want to check streets containing the term Robert. We get 94 streets. Okay. So let's, for example, do a query that's the Professor Delegate talked before about the civil rights movement and Confederate memorials being removed or in the process of trying to be removed. So let's check, for example, in Texas, for the Confederate General Robert Edward Lee. Okay. So if we want to make a query to get the street named after Robert Edward Lee, it's better if we type different forms of this name. For example, Robert E. Lee, or simply Robert Lee. And we submit the query, and we get that we have in Texas 15 streets named after the Confederate General Robert Lee. We can, the results are reported in an interactive map. We can zoom in to see the location of the city, and we can download the data by streets. So the result, the queries, we can download it by streets or group at the county level. So if we are interested in counting how many streets are in each county, so we download the data at the county level. If we want to know the location, or we want to get a list of all the streets from the query, so we download the data by streets. For example, let's download the data to see what we get. We get this Excel file in which we have a sheet with the result of the query, the street names, and interestingly the location. And this is interesting because we can check this precise location in other apps, for example, in Google Maps. If we go to Google Maps, I have Google Maps open here, and we, for example, look at this street in San Antonio, we copy and we simply copy the coordinates, latitude and longitude coordinates. We go here, we paste here, and we search. Well, we have here the street, the Robert Lee Street in San Antonio. We, for example, if we have a list of streets and we want to get additional data, because it's just not counting the number of streets, also the characteristics of the streets are important. We can here create additional columns and to include, for example, the length of the street. We can calculate the length of the street with Google Maps. This street has 723 meters. We can type here this information, and we can also see the location, the type of street, the type of the type of neighborhood. Okay, we can go to Google Streets, and we can see the neighborhood. We can see whether there is a street sign or the information that contain the street sign. And we go here to the intersection and we see that there is a street sign, and indeed it's a street named after Robert E. Lee, or Edward Lee. Okay, so
That's outstanding. Thank you so much for doing the live demo of the functionality, because that's really helpful for people to see how that works. It's simple, but of course, if you don't know, you don't know the next step, you can get stuck. And so I'll just mention that CSV file that you saved, the Excel file, same thing if teachers or students are using Esri's ArcGIS online, that's the same type of file that they could input there. I also appreciated the idea that you could generate a metric, for example, the meters or feet of street that are carrying this name. And you showed how to query textual data, that you have to think about the different formats they could use the wildcards, because as you zoomed into Robert E. Lee Street in San Antonio there, I couldn't help notice that the next street above it was Lee Street.
yeah, I actually did it before, but you finally just
Yeah. And then you have, so sometimes it's really obvious what's happening because uh-oh. I did mean to jump out of that video because we're getting close to our time, but I didn't mean to do it so abruptly. Thank you for the instruction. Sorry for the rough end to the video, but this is exactly what we wanted to get to, was what you can do with this information. So let me get back into my screen sharing and I'll figure this out. Because as I mentioned, you can get, you don't have to deal with me cutting off people. You can get to the full length of the interview, which includes more information about Dr. Alderman's research on place names related to the civil rights movement. He did talk more about MLK streets than I let you hear about. You can also hear about how his work with community advocates informed his scholarship and actually helped him grow as a scholar. You can hear some of the conversation we had around Daniel's research he shared about not just offensive place names, but how naming streets in certain ways reinforces certain social values. I call this the sociospatial dialectic, which is how cultural groups, particularly dominant groups, tend to produce spaces that reinforce and reproduce the types of social values and cultural values that advantage them. And so that's one of the reasons it's important to get involved in making a more inclusive and less offensive landscape by addressing place names. And so there's also more ideas that Daniel was getting into there about how you can import the place names app data into Google Earth, and further, just like he was doing in Google Maps, in Google Earth, you can do some further exploration. So we have questions or feedback that's been coming in. And I hear from Miss Godinez, who's in Hamilton, California, that she's going to have her students, who I believe are fourth grade, use the Place Names app and explore towns, streets in their local town. Renee Neal, who's also in California, shared some questions from her kids in class, and I had those pulled up, but I did not get to look at them yet. So people can click through on that link and see the questions. Anything else, please feel free to continue putting questions in. But also, we didn't want you to just, this isn't like a TV show that you just watch and if it's over, you maybe think about it for a few minutes. There's things you can do, right? So we prepared a sheet with some resources and activities so you can read about the issue, you can use the tools for research and action that are there, and you can consider what the pathways look like to reconciliation. It's not just a fix of changing the name. It might be to announcing the problem with the name, to building relationships around the change, and to create a different attitude towards the community going forward. As I said in the beginning, I really encourage you to reflect on your own experiences and potential biases and learn from open discussions with others. As a white male, I was pretty dense to the significance and the commonplace usage of offensive place names. And then once I became aware, they kind of popped out everywhere. And so there's going to be people that can help you to be more alert to and aware of what's happening with this because they're more sensitive to it. And we really want to encourage you to collect information about your community. So yes, Miss Godinez's class, can't say that in the possessive, excellent work. That's exactly what we wanted you to do. Collect information about your community, raise awareness, and inform your own actions. So that's what we're hoping is going to be happening after this webinar. So please do access the resources and activities. I'll put the link in the chat one more time. I apologize for not getting to all of the questions in live format, but you could see we packed a lot in. And so I just want to really thank you for being here. If you're an educator, I want to encourage you for your Geography Awareness Week homework to find out if your state has a group, a Geographic Alliance, or another group that's promoting geography education. And either way, I'd like you to think about joining the National Council for Geographic Education. For students, it's only $25 a year. And we're holding a conference in Omaha, Nebraska in October 2025 that you're very much invited to. So we're getting to the last 2 minutes. Derek or Daniel, did you have anything you would like to say to wrap up?
No, I don't have anything to add, but very much appreciate having been part of this and would encourage all the educators and students and anyone else who's joining us if they have a need or I can be of some assistance, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Excellent. Well, on behalf of myself, but also I think everybody, I want to thank you for the work that you've done. Daniel, I'm very appreciative for the app that you've created and your team's created. Anything you would say as we depart on our inquiry journeys?
Yes, that I am happy to answer any question that you can make by email. So feel free to contact me if you want to if you want to know something else about the app or you have any doubt. Okay, feel free to contact me. I am gonna be happy to answer all of you.
Excellent. That's great. So we're building community right here. You guys that have access to the slides have access to communication with Dr. Alderman or Dr. Otto Peralius. So if you're interested and you're moving forward with doing some thinking or work around this topic, you can reach out to them for some support. Otherwise, I want to just really, again, thank you and hope that you have a great Geography Awareness Week. And the rest of your day goes really well. So thank you again for joining today's webinar.